we had some disagreement there.
Sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I. Oh no, sorry. No, I mean, I know I fully support you exposing all the
Right.
like the corruption. Um, I think it's just as bad. Um, like it's a terrible time in the church with
Hmm.
the corruption of the bishops and stuff. But I mean, I don't, like I don't see the right thing being to go to orthodoxy.
Hmm.
I think that's what a lot of people are doing. Um, like I'm personally a Byzantine Catholic,
Hmm.
um, and I mean like the hierarchy in the Byzantine Catholic Church is just as corrupt. Just from my experience in the eparchy, like you have people from the Roman Catholic diocese like coming in and teaching stuff that's just like horrible. But
Hmm.
the fact remains like I believe like the historical evidence points to Christ founding his church and promising for it to be eternal, and I don't believe that it can be compared to like the Second Temple, because yeah, I think he made an explicit promise, and especially to Saint Peter, of its kind of everlasting uh, like truthfulness and doctrine.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that the corruption is coming from the men, and yet I think a lot. What happens is a lot of people, they look at the corruption of the Catholic Church and then they'll um, go to Orthodoxy. But I'm just thinking, like, by that logic, if the Orthodox bishops become corrupt, like during the Soviet period, they're just going to end up leaving apostolic Christianity. So I don't know if I have any disagreements with you in particular. I was
Hmm.
more talking to people in the comments.
Okay. Um, you said that there was terrible things there, that there are terrible things being taught in the Byzantine Church. I'm just curious, like what's being taught that's terrible. I've never been to the Greek
Um,
or the Greek Catholic Church.
well, I mean, it's not really coming from the church itself. It's really what they do is to try and involve the eparchy with
Hmm.
the Roman Catholic, I guess, dioceses. They'll host um, these bishops and priests. They'll like invite these guest priests from the Roman Catholic diocese, and they'll come in and talk about the synod, for example. Or there was recently like a conference where they had Cardinal Dolan, and he's like horrible. Um,
He is,
so
yes.
basically, it's like they're kind of, I was I don't want to like say too much because I'm trying to become like a priest in the Byzantine Catholic
Oh,
Church,
okay.
but like the there's a lot of problems, and I was told beforehand, like I was told that they were kind of cooperating with the Roman Catholic Church's kind of dissent. But I mean, I believe that at least the See of Rome has maintained doctrinal fidelity and clarity, despite its corruption. And it's like I desire to be in communion with the sea,
Hmm.
but I want to. I would hope to kind of remain free of the people involved with it because of its corruption right now.
Well, the way I look at it is, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No,
Oh,
I didn't mean
I
like
thought you
to
said
like
something.
put
Oh,
you in
okay. I
that.
thought you said something. The way I look at it is that God made an everlasting covenant with Abraham, and He said, "I will make this everlasting covenant with you. It'll be forever." And that covenant included the Jews. Like the Jews were the original branches of the tree, and Saint Paul said in his letter to the Romans that if God cut off the original branches, God shall also cut you off. So just because a church is founded by God, and I've said this before in numerous of my videos, but just because God has founded a church doesn't mean that He won't destroy it. That's how
Um,
that's where I'm coming from with this.
yeah, I definitely like I know that in Romans and stuff, and it's just I feel like the theology of Christ's covenant was intended to be until the end of the world, and I assume what Paul is talking about is more the people being cut off rather than Peter's authority is what I'm thinking.
But since the church can go ahead.
Sorry, no, because it's like the See of Rome has been looked to for doctrinal clarity since the start of the church, and I don't think that God would necessarily destroy the authority of the See that kind of binds and unites the church more than the people who are corrupting it.
But because the letter was written to the Roman Church, it wasn't sent to particular individuals. It was sent to the church itself, for the church. And when he said that just as God cut off the original branches, he was not talking about just individuals. He was also talking about an institution as well. Remember the story when the Pharisees are coming to Jesus and they see Jesus and his disciples picking wheat on the Sabbath. And the Pharisees are saying, "Why are you picking wheat on the Sabbath? Don't you know it's against the law?" And Jesus gives the wheat to his disciples. And then he says the Sabbath was made for man, not man made for the Sabbath. So it's almost like by giving that wheat to the disciples, God was telling the Jewish priesthood, this is the new priesthood. I'm giving this wheat, the bread sacrifice or the communion, the sacrifice of the communion, I'm giving that to the disciples. This new priesthood is coming, the priesthood of Melchizedek. So when Paul said, just as God cut off the branches, the original branches, he wasn't talking about just individuals, but also an institution, which means that an institution itself could also be cut off.
I mean, yes, and the church Paul was talking to was established by Peter, and Peter was the head of the apostles. But like with God's coming into the world to found the new covenant, I interpret that as being unto the end of the world, and I believe the church fathers would too. And I believe that the kind of universal stance of the first millennia of Christianity was that the apostolic succession would last into the end of the age, despite corruption. And there was a huge problem with Donatism, where you had sinners who were not being recognized as bishops and priests because of their sins when they fell into idolatry and such things. But I think what happened was the bishops recognized that if this happened, it could mean the extinction of the church, because if people, if like bishops are losing their authority, if all these bishops, like you had with Athanasius, for example, you had pretty much all the bishops becoming Arian. It's like the ideology is like, if all these bishops are losing their authority, then that could mean the extinguishment and contradiction of the new covenant lasting to the end of the world.
And if yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just think I think that the conditions that Christ promised about the eternity of his new covenant it rests upon the bishops having authority and being able to pass it down despite whatever sins they may have.
But is there so there's different things, there's multiple different things that I want to say to that. The the Donatist argument. The Donatists were upset, if I remember correctly, about Christians who denied the faith being allowed to come back to the faith. I think I'm correct on that. It's been a while since I've read on this history. Yeah, so they were upset that all these Christians who, in a moment of fear and weakness, denied the faith to save their own lives, now they're being brought back to the faith. Well, the Donatists were just they were just dead wrong about that position. What the church was doing at that time by allowing these people to come back to the church wasn't really bad. It was merciful, understanding human weakness, the human weakness of wanting to live and not wanting to die. So it's understandable that people would deny their faith to survive because, I mean, most of us don't really want to die. Peter kind of had a similar situation in the sense that, well, you could argue that it was the same situation in the sense that he was terrified of the mob. You know, and anytime someone came to him and said, "Well, weren't you with Jesus?" And he said, "No, I have nothing to do with him. I have nothing to do with Jesus." And he denied Christ 3 times, and he felt very guilty about this. And Jesus Christ, God the Son, was with Peter after the resurrection, and he said, "Do you love me?" And Peter said, "Yes." Then feed my sheep. And then he does this 3 times. And that was because he denied Christ 3 times. So that was Peter's redemption. So the Donatists were just theologically wrong to go against the church on that issue. What we are dealing with right now is not people who are upset about that sort of thing, like bringing people who deny the faith back into the faith. What we are dealing with is Sodom. And St. Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans that when people entered Sodom, when people indulged into homosexuality, God gave them up. It says, and God gave them up to their depraved desires. This is something very, very serious. And the fact that you have so many cardinals, priests, monks, who are endorsing Sodom, participating in Sodom, preying on people, trying to groom young men into Sodom. This is something that God destroyed entire cities over. And that's my issue. Like this is not just a case of, well, you're just like the Donatist. Well, the Donatists were just wrong. We can see it in their position. It's very simple. I think St. Augustine, he addressed the Donatists, and he brought this very argument up, like, hey, Peter denied Christ 3 times, yet Christ brought him back and says, and told him to feed my flock. Whereas with the situation that we have now, when we see, for example, multiple different things, Pope Francis saying that, gay unions, protection for gay unions is a good thing. And he demanded this both when he was in Buenos Aires and also while he was Pope. And people will say, well, we have to bring up context and all these things, but it's like, what context is this ever okay? In what context is this ever okay for Catholicism? And then you have, for example, the church making it official in the catechism that the death penalty is wrong and should be abolished. That also is serious, in my opinion. This to make it official, and I understand that the idea of abolishing the death penalty had been in the Catholic Church for a while. You can go back to John Paul II and see that he was against the death penalty. He was also against life in prison. But to make that a part of the catechism, that's bad. That is just bad overall. But I'll let you respond.
No, yeah, I mean, in terms of the death penalty thing, yeah, I completely agree. It was
okay.
It was wrong, but I again, it's like these for the death penalty, at least these are church practices,
mm-hmm.
and so in terms of like slavery, for example, there's no kind of moral like saying it's objectively wrong. It's a practice that's discontinued, and I think it's kind of similar with the death penalty. It's like the Pope can be wrong about it, but it's a practice that he's discontinuing, which again, it's like he has no input to it, especially with our modern world. So it's kind of ironic how he's like saying against the death penalty and then at the same time kind of fighting against those who would be like more conservative, like since Vatican II. Like with, like, for example, the Legion of Decency being abolished. Like, supposedly we're in a pluralistic society, but then now they want to impose more liberal practices. It's hypocritical. But Chopo sent me some things which were good points. And well, the first thing I want to cover is the Donatists, because the part of their beliefs were that priests who sinned were not priests anymore. Like, they lost their sacramental validity, and like in terms of like grave sins, and so like this is important because, like, again, it could extinguish the line of apostolic succession, and Robert Bellarmine, he kind of somewhat with this, and he was talking about the possibility of a heretical pope, and I think there was another saint, John of St. Thomas, but like part of the conclusions that at least John of St. Thomas reached was that and I think St. Vincent Ferrer, but basically and Paul IV talking about if popes were in heresy, basically they're either or bishops, especially Paul IV, he taught this, like if the bishops or cardinals or popes or anyone was teaching something that was heretical, they were not to be obeyed. And Robert Bellarmine's opinion was that these, although they may be like heretics, they would need to be judged as such publicly by the church in order to be deposed, kind of refusing the idea that a person would lose authority automatically, because then you could never know who was valid or not. Chopo said, was talking about like the temple and the covenant, and he said that these were set up and abolished by God directly through his like direct intervention. And so, yeah, I this is like what I'm having trouble with too, is that like in both cases where God set up or destroyed the covenant, he was physically present, and it was kind of a world-changing event. When Paul writes about people being given up into sin, on the one hand, it could look like when he's talking to the church that they would be given up, and that could apply to Rome and Rome's church. But I don't know if it could apply to the See of Peter if it's intimately connected with the everlasting covenant, which it seems to have been from the beginning of the church.
But you,
and it, like
okay.
when oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No. When God kind of gives these people up to their passions because of wickedness, I feel like we can see this multiple times in history. With America too, and obviously with the Roman Church, or at least the priests of the Roman Church. And I seem to think that it's God's kind of abandoning protection over them because of like their wickedness and such, and not preventing them from falling deeper into sin.
Well, I mean, the Roman Church, the Vatican, was sacked in 1527, and that was the worst sacking in its history. And there was a Spanish observer who stated that he asked the question, why would God allow this to happen? And he said the only thing that I can compare this to is to the destruction of Rome, or sorry, the sacking of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. Do you see what I mean? That attack yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I think that would be a perfect example of how God would do such a thing. Like,
yeah, and
like God, that's exactly
Yes, and you had Brandano de Petroio stating that God will destroy the Vatican because of the sins of the Vatican, which was sodomy. And there was a Spanish observer, the same guy who stated that the only reason why he could see he could see as to why God would destroy the Vatican is for the evils of the Vatican. And he stated what these evils were. He stated that these evils were homosexuality. He named other things as well, but one of them was homosexuality. And also you have Savonarola. Savonarola stated that the Vatican corrupts young boys, molests boys, and they killed Savonarola. They killed Savonarola because they were afraid that he was going to start a revolution on the Vatican. I mean, the question is which side would you pick? The side of Savonarola or the side of the Pope at the time, who I'm pretty certain was Pope Alexander VI? That's the question that I have.
Yes,
go ahead. Well, let me just address. Let me just address the other things, because you listed you stated a number of other things that I want to address real quick. Chopo is feeding you ammunition. I mean, it's just kind of hilarious, but that guy is always he's always starting stuff. This guy, but anyway, he's a funny guy. The idea that priests, their sins don't take away their priesthood, would you say, or don't take away their validity? Would you say that there is a limit to this? That's the question that I have.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this was answered by the church already, but in terms of like God punishing the Vatican, I don't know, like there's a difference between like him destroying a bunch of people because of sin and destroying the buildings and such, versus like letting sacramental authority like invisibly slip out of someone's hands. Like you know, like this would, like for someone to, let's say that a priest was a extremely grave sinner and he was, you know, committing all sorts of crimes and sins, like he needs to be punished and stuff, but the sacramental orders are kind of infused into his soul, and that's not for his benefit, that's for the benefit of the laity.
So then what do you say when God tells the children of Israel, I do not even want your sacrifices?
Well, that was his. Are you talking about his incarnation or in the Old Testament?
In the Old Testament, the sacrifices of the animals was basically that was like the proto Eucharist, if you will. That was the foreshadowing to the Eucharist, and they needed to do those sacrifices for the forgiveness of sins, and the priests of Israel were given that authority. And God is saying, I don't want your sacrifices. So don't you think that could actually happen with the Vatican? Do you think that's a possibility or no?
Well, I mean, I don't think that God views kind of the masses as individual sacrifices. It's more like representing Christ's sacrifice, and what the mass is doing is really just making that present to the people, which requires confession and repentance beforehand.
But the sacrifice of the animal was a foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Christ, and it was needed for the forgiveness of sins in the temple. And the priest would have to do that, would have to make a sacrifice on behalf of the children of Israel as well. They would make sacrifices. And God is saying, I don't want them. And he tells Jeremiah, do not even pray for these people. I will not even listen to your intercession. So, and then you have St. Paul in his letter to the Romans telling the Roman church about homosexuality, and he's telling them God gave them up to their depraved minds. And then later on in the same letter, he says that just as the old branches were cut off, do not think that God will not cut you off. Well, the institution, when it talks about the branches, it's not just talking about individuals, it's talking about the institution itself. So the question I have is, what is the limit? Because you said that priests, doesn't matter what sins they commit, they still have this authority that's given to them for the forgiveness of sins and for the giving of the Eucharist. What is the limit? What is the point where you'll say, no, this is too much?
Yeah, I mean that's, Yeah, I mean, there's a difference of opinion on this between um, the East and the West, because the West has the uh, kind of theology of ex opere operatio. So, um, I mean, in terms of like Christian life and what the church has kind of said is possible, I don't believe that it would be possible in any way for a person
Okay.
to basically lose their sacramental authority besides the judgment of the church. And I'm just saying, like, I see what you're saying, and I could totally see how um I'm just the problem is that I'm not seeing
Sorry, you broke up. You
where
broke up there.
this
Sorry, what did you say? You said the problem is you're not seeing what?
I'm not seeing where this could ever be found in like the realm of possibility by any of the church fathers or doctors or
You don't see how
saints.
this
Like
is
I'm not
okay.
seeing
Okay, so let me give you.
like
Okay, go ahead.
no, yeah, no. I'm just saying, like, no. Were you gonna give me a quote? I don't know.
This is a quote from Robert Bellarmine in his book De Ecclesia. He says, "Occult heretics are still of the church. They are parts and members. Therefore, the Pope who is an occult heretic is still Pope." Would you agree with this?
Yes.
So even if the Pope is like a devil worshiper, and he's got Baphomet in his room, he's still the Pope.
Yeah. Well, the the Pope would. I don't think technically the Pope has to be a priest. I'm not 100% sure that.
The Pope is not a priest. He can give communion, though. Can't the Pope give communion? The
no,
Pope,
yeah,
the highest member of the church, is not a priest. Isn't he like the priest of all the priests?
Yes, I must be thinking of something. I was
Okay.
thinking about the Renaissance, but no, like I mean, we had that with Alexander the Sixth. He had
Yes, we did.
the image of Isis,
That's correct.
and yet he still and yet he still passed on the apostolic authority to the successors and many good popes after him. I don't think the office is dependent on the moral character of the person. What's important is that it's passed on, and these people will be judged. And I believe that God works these things out in His providence. But
So basically, there's no limits. That's what you're telling me. There's no limits.
well, the limit would be if he imposed heresy on the church. That would make him lose his office. And there's a difference of opinion on that, whether that's automatic or not. But if he made an ex cathedra statement with material heresy, I think that would cut him off from his office. That wouldn't invalidate him as
Why wasn't he cut off when he had an image of himself as a bull, as the bull god Apis, on an ark like the golden calf of the book of Exodus? And that was in the papal apartment, and you can see it in the Vatican today. I mean, wouldn't you be cut off for something as egregious as that?
Well, I mean, what happened? What he wasn't. It was the church's kind of guidelines on this really only address the public promulgation or preaching of heresy, and this is like if a pope would try to preach heresy infallibly, like his I guess idolatries and stuff would be kind of like how Solomon was an idolater in the end of his life, but he was still able to pass
and King
kingship to his sons, and
Solomon,
his sons were punished.
Okay, but King Solomon also wrote in his Lamentations his thirst for redemption. You don't have that with Alexander the Sixth. You don't have that with the Pope who commissioned, for example, the Sistine Chapel, in which you see naked men. You see a man getting his penis bitten by a snake, and the Pope at that time, I think it was Pope Paul the Fourth or Pope Paul the Third, I'm pretty certain. Pope Paul the Third said that's okay because whatever, it doesn't matter. And then the image of the man with his penis being bitten by a snake is that of De Cesena. And De Cesena went to the Pope and said, have this Michelangelo guy get rid of this image of me. And the Pope said, sorry, my jurisdiction is not in hell.
Yeah.
That's so bizarre. That's public though. But the system, okay, that's fine. But my point is that's public. That's not just private. That's public. Yes, and what is allowed in private eventually becomes public. Like, for example, Pope Alexander VI putting his blessing on the heretical work of Pico della Mirandola.
Yes, the Pope's advancements of the occultists was more off the books. It wasn't publicly promulgated, and yes, these were wicked things. But like, for example, there were many Israelite kings who were sinners, unrepentant to death. Ahab, for example. And the shit passed on, and God had it abolished eventually when he destroyed the Jerusalem. But
and he destroyed Jerusalem, and so that should worry us about the Vatican.
Well, I mean, like you said, the Vatican was destroyed, and it's just I see the Davidic promise of like with Eliakim and like the sure peg and being immovable and the everlasting throne of David with Christ and his ministers on earth. I don't see how that can be interrupted, especially since it hasn't been interrupted in 2,000 years, and we're coming at a point where is according to the original computation, Christ was born in 4,036 year of the world or something, and we're reaching like the 6,000th year, and I don't know how Christ intends to wrap up history, but I do believe that there will be. I mean, we see that there has been a great falling away, but I don't believe that he will take away the authority of the apostles' successors.
So, when David murdered Uriah the Hittite and slept with his wife, was that done in public or private?
Public, but
that was done publicly.
His kingship and
hold on, whoa. David did not sleep with Bathsheba publicly.
Oh, okay. I mean, I thought it was like known to Nathan, and I mean, I don't know how many people knew about it, but
it wasn't done publicly though. It wasn't done for everyone to see.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and God still punished David.
So yeah, private.
Yeah, and God punished David.
Yes.
Yes. So what is done in private, if it is allowed to fester, eventually becomes public. And Pope Alexander VI gave his blessing to the works of Pico della Mirandola, and the works of Pico della Mirandola were not private. These were public works, and the Pope gave his blessing to them. This is not a private matter. This is a public matter.
Yes, but there's like a very specific, I guess, category of like versus like the Pope's acts versus his.
Hold on, you just said yes. You just said yes. What do you mean by yes? You said I said my statement, and then you said yes. What do you mean by yes?
Like if people knew about it, then it was public.
It was public. So you said before that these things were private, but they're not. They're public. And then you brought up David, whose sins were private. But I'm talking about something that is not just private, but public.
Yes, and I mean, there were public idol worshippers who were kings, and they retained the kingship and passed it on. And the there were wicked acts done in public by popes. It's just what I'm talking about.
Did not the prophet slaughter the entire family of Ahab over this type of stuff?
And the crown continued to be passed on. It did not extinguish.
And the king was slaughtered, and his sons were slaughtered. And then it wasn't passed down to a family member of Ahab. It was passed down, I believe, to Elisha, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like, there has to be this succession. I think you're using the kingship argument a little too black and white.
Well, I mean, same with, the popes are elected, and it's just that there always is a someone on the throne, no matter.
So yeah, there's always gonna be someone on the throne, but it had to have been someone who was worthy of the throne according to God at this point. And if you want to use the example of the Israelite kings, I mean, would you be okay with some righteous prophet coming along and slaughtering people in the Vatican?
I don't know. I mean, if God allowed that, then God allowed it, and that's part of His plan. But I'm sure that again, like a pope would be elected.
I'm pretty certain that you would be against it. You would say, "Oh no, this guy's crazy. What's going on here?" But it's like, well, no, there's some punishment taking place.
Well, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
If a pope was evil and he was slaughtered for being wicked, then that would be God's punishment on him. But it does not mean God extinguishes the entire authority of His church and the sacramental system.
No, we're not saying that, or I'm not saying that the whole church gets extinguished because Christ said that the gates of hell shall not prevail. The Roman Church is not the only church that has apostolic succession. There's the Greek Orthodox Church. The Coptic Church even has apostolic succession. And even if you look, for example, at the Church of Antioch, the Church of Antioch was founded by St. Peter. So how come the Church of Antioch doesn't have primacy? So the Roman Catholic Church is not the only church that was founded by Jesus Christ. There were others.
Well, I don't think you. This is not how ecclesiology is understood in the church. This is not how it really works. It's these churches are subject to the first see, and that's how it's always been. And Peter did not establish the first see in Antioch. It was never seen as such. He
was the bishop of Antioch. Does it not say in the Bible that he was the bishop of Antioch? That he was in the Church of Antioch?
Well, Antioch has never claimed to be the first see.
Neither is Rome in the Bible.
Rome has always had that. Well, you can't say Bible alone because we have we have like Clement's letters, and we have so much early church evidence of Rome having primacy and the authority of the apostles in terms of like the schismatic churches. These churches are not part of the one body of Christ because they've severed themselves from the first see. This has been doctrine. Like you cannot, like especially the Chalcedonian Christians in terms of the Coptic Christians. Now I don't know what like being like more open to communion with them, but like historically it's been understood that the Coptics have a faulty understanding of Christ. I know, I understand, but it has apostolic succession. But it has apostolic succession. And Russian Church, just as all of these Eastern Orthodox churches, they can all be traced back to the apostles. So it's not just so it's not just apostolic succession. Well, apostolic succession
No,
is valid, and um,
but you keep bringing up apostolic succession. It's not, that's been my whole point since the beginning. It's not just about apostolic succession. Not everything is about apostolic succession. The Roman Church has apostolic succession, just like the temple in Israel at the time of Christ had that succession all the way back to the prophets, but God destroyed it. The Roman Church has apostolic succession, but that does not mean that God will not destroy it or that God cannot destroy it. That's been my whole point.
well,
Because this entire discussion,
no,
but this entire discussion has been you just saying apostolic succession, and I'm like, wait a second, what about this pope and that pope? And you're like, wait, all the successions of the kings, and you're bringing up the kingship of Israel and how the kings had successors and all these things. Like, okay, but that's not the only thing that matters, because I can point to, like I said, the Coptic Church, and they also have apostolic succession. They can trace themselves back to the apostles historically. They're very ancient. Same thing with the Ethiopians. Ethiopia was the first nation in Christian history to declare, or after Armenia, actually. Ethiopia was the second country in history to declare itself a Christian nation. But yet you wouldn't say that Ethiopian Christians are Orthodox. I think they have some heretical views on the humanity of Christ, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not just apostolic succession. We have to look at what is being stated, the actions also, the fruits of the tree.
I mean, in terms of doctrinal fidelity, like the Seminarians could claim apostolic succession.
Exactly. The Roman Catholic Church claims it. And just as the priest told Jesus, we have Moses as our prophet. We have Moses, and God said, that doesn't matter, because if you knew Moses, you would know me. Or like when the children of Israel said, we have Abraham. We are sons of Abraham. They were pointing to that succession back to Abraham. And John the Baptist said, well, God can make these very stones into sons of Abraham.
Yes, and I mean, when it comes to apostolic succession, I think it's important that the See of Peter is recognized as the first See, and I think Chope, you conflated the Petrine See with apostolic succession, but I in terms of the Church of Rome, it's always been known for its doctrinal fidelity and being the first see, and all the church needs to be in communion with them in order to be part of the true church. And I think that these break-off churches can be compared to the Samaritans because they err doctrinally, and it's not going to help people if people leave a church that has not erred doctrinally and join a church that is in doctrinal error but has more moral people in it, because it's just going to vacate the true church of good and moral people. If the Roman Church is upholding the true doctrine, what needs to happen is that moral people need to be in charge of it. It can't, it's not going to all crumble down. Everything the church has taught and believed in does not disappear because of a corrupt hierarchy. What needs to happen is just people to run the church, because
we're not seeing just people. We're not seeing just people running the church. We're seeing very corrupt people running everything. Just like the Pharisaical order was corrupt before the coming of Christ. And I believe that the state of the world when Jesus Christ comes and right before he comes will be similar to that of the state of the world before he came the first time, which is a very, very corrupt priesthood, a very corrupt institution.
I didn't get that.
My Siri thing just popped up.
I agree with what you said.
Okay.
I agree with what you said, and I believe that yes, the Church of Rome is extremely corrupt. But the problem is to go into a schismatic sect where they only have partial truth. There's so many errors in these heretical sects that are not as corrupt. It's not going to help anyone because only people in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church can be saved. That's been true.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Schism is a serious, deadly sin. And
what about homosexuality?
Yes, of course.
And you see the church falling right into it.
And that's a problem. And
it's not. Well, it's not just okay. It's not just a problem. I wouldn't just say it's a problem. I would say it's a massive, huge evil that has taken over the church. And
yes,
so, if you were, go ahead. My point is that if you're in, okay, I'll let you finish and then I'll respond.
Okay. No. Yeah. I mean, this sin is committed by evil people, and it's infiltrated the hierarchy. I'm just saying it can't compromise the doctrine when the doctrine has remained true, and it's the people that need to be punished, and the priesthood that needs to be punished. And I don't think someone should compromise to heresy because of bad people, because if that other organization becomes corrupt, then they're just going to run to another organization, and they're not going to be keeping their faith intact and compromising because of some other person's wickedness.
So here's something that I've heard of, and this is I'll get your response from this if you want to. First Council of Constantinople. It was convened to basically define the doctrine of the Trinity. The council was rejected initially by the Roman Church over a geopolitical dispute because the Greeks were saying that Constantinople is the second Rome, and the Vatican didn't like it, and the Vatican didn't like this council, the First Council of Constantinople. And so the people who were behind this council were rejected. They were considered to be in schism. But yet today, the Roman Catholic Church accepts the First Council of Constantinople. So why does the Roman Catholic Church accept a council that was done technically in schism?
It was confirmed by the Pope.
It was later on confirmed by the Pope. It was later on accepted by the Pope.
Well, in the Council of Constantinople, it says that Rome is the first see.
And it didn't have an issue with that. It stated that Rome is the first see, but they said that Constantinople is the second, and the Vatican didn't like it. So those people were technically in schism. That council was not considered legitimate initially until later on. Not until later on.
It was considered legitimate because the Pope confirmed it.
Later on.
Yes. It was,
right.
It was
so.
Yeah.
Right. So my point is that the Vatican rejects the Roman See, whichever you want to call it, rejects a Greek council and says, well, it's in schism, and all of the Christians at that time were like, wait, the Roman Church says it's in schism, the Greek says it's okay, well, I'm going to go with the Greeks, and people like yourself or people who agree with you would say, well, no, it's in schism, blah, 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 but then later on the Vatican says, actually, no, it's okay. So I don't need the Roman Catholic Church to confirm doctrine, because I could have just gone to the First Council of Constantinople when it was in schism, and I would have been correct.
Well, two things was, I don't think the Roman Church did the Roman Church anathematize
Yeah,
them?
they were. It was considered to be in schism. It was considered to be in schism initially, and that's my whole point. My whole point is a council in schism can still be correct, and the council was accepted. The council was accepted.
What wasn't it changed though? Didn't they say that Constantinople was fifth and it was Antioch was second or third or something like that? It was. I thought they changed it.
The point is that the point is not right. The point is not the geopolitical differences. The point is the theological elucidation in the council. That is what is important. And technically, that council was considered to be in schism. The people who did that council were considered to be in schism because the Pope was angry because they said, well, Constantinople can be number 2. And they didn't like that. And so here are the Greeks saying doctrinal truth without the Pope.
Wait, I think what happened was they were saying Constantinople was second in place of another apostolic church, if it was Antioch or some other church. And I think what happened was they were iconoclast, when they corrected the order, the seas.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to stop you there. Those Greek Christians were not iconoclasts. We're not talking about iconoclasm here. Two different things, and that's a different historical situation.
Yeah, I mean, later on. That's what I'm saying. Later on, the Greek bishops were.
Yeah, later on, sure, they were Greeks who became iconoclastic, and they were condemned by, what was his name? Theodore the Studite, and he was a Greek Orthodox.
Well, during that time, Rome was the Orthodox see, and the reason that iconoclasm didn't become the
okay, but we're switching off to a different topic here. I don't want to talk about iconoclasm. I reject iconoclasm. I'm talking about the fact that First Constantinople was considered to be in schism, and then later on the Pope affirmed the doctrine that was elucidated in First Constantinople. So therefore, I do not need the Pope to affirm doctrine for me. I could have just been under the Greeks, and I would have gotten the doctrinal truth in First Constantinople without the Pope's approval, because the Pope did not approve of the council. He didn't like what was being said.
Well, what I was trying to say is that the Pope, his accepting of it made it.
His accepting of it made it orthodox. That's what I know exactly what you're going to say, because I know the position. I've studied this stuff before. I know the Catholic position. It wasn't acceptable until the Pope accepted it. But the Trinitarian doctrine that is elucidated, that is explained and proclaimed in First Constantinople is orthodox, and it was orthodox even without the Pope's approval. Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Yes, I see what you're saying, but this is why I brought up the iconoclast thing. Is that you have you can have schismatic churches that are orthodox but still schismatic, and two is that the Orthodox and later on Rome never fell into that heresy, and that it was part of that guarantee that Rome would never fall into heresy.
Okay, we're running in circles, so I'm just going to say one more thing about this, and then that's it. If I had accepted the Trinitarian doctrine in First Constantinople without the Pope's approval, I would have been doctrinally correct. Regardless, even if the Pope rejected it, and if he didn't like the council, that would not have mattered. Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Yes.
Because the Catholic argument is you need the Pope to approve of it. So I need the Pope to approve First Constantinople, and until he doesn't approve of it, I'm not going to accept it. Well, that's not logical, because it was doctrinally true, and later on the church did accept it. So if I had accepted what was stated in Constantinople, I would have been fine, theologically speaking. Oh, but you need the Pope's approval. Well, if it's the truth, it's the truth. And the Pope didn't approve of it. Why didn't the Pope approve of it? Were they preaching Arianism? No. The only reason why he didn't approve of it was because of some geopolitical contention. That was it. It had nothing to do with theology. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So even if I had accepted what the Greeks were saying, you would be saying, no, you're in schism. And I'd be like, no, I'm doctrinally correct. But the Pope has to accept it, because the Pope can reject it because he doesn't like it for some geopolitical reason. That's what I'm saying. But you're going to bring up iconoclasm, which I'm not really sure. I know you're going to say that because they were Greeks who became iconoclast. The Greeks, not all the Greeks became iconoclastic, and iconoclasm did not take over it didn't take over the Greek church. There was an iconoclastic church that was there, and there was a decades-long battle between the Greek Orthodox and the iconoclast. And if you were living in Greece at the time, you would say, well, no, I'm going to follow the people who have the icons. And you would be correct. And they were Greeks who fought against the iconoclasts, even though they were technically in schism. They were Greeks who fought against the iconoclasts. They didn't need the Pope to know that iconoclasm is a heresy.
Yes, and there were, I don't know if that's the view nowadays, that ecumenical councils are infallible, but I think the ecumenical councils are infallible. I think that's the teaching. So,
right, and we have an infallible council for. Okay, sorry, I disrupted you. Go ahead. I thought you stopped. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, sorry. We have these infallible councils, and they've given us doctrinal orthodoxy versus like later on, like these ecumenical councils were all confirmed by the Pope, and they're all doctrinally true, compared to like the Orthodox councils, which like say that for example the Filioque is blasphemy, when you have early church fathers proclaiming the Filioque. So where are you? Like,
you do realize
Orthodoxy in the Eastern
right,
Church.
but you do realize that they were Greeks. And I just want to go back to the iconoclasm argument that you brought up, because now we're talking about the Filioque, iconoclasm, Filioque. Okay, you do realize that they were Greeks who were killed because they refused to abide by the iconoclasts.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I mean,
Yeah, they weren't under
the
Rome.
truth.
But they weren't under Rome. They knew that it was evil.
Yes, because of the infallible ecumenical councils.
The infallible ecumenical council that the church initially rejected.
Well, I don't think they rejected the doctrine.
They did. They rejected the council, which you're saying is infallible now.
Well, how would they go about and accept it if they rejected Trinitarianism?
I'm not going to get into this whole rabbit hole, because we're going to run around in circles in this labyrinth of arguing. But my point stands. You just said that the ecumenical councils are infallible, which I agree. And one of them was initially rejected by the Pope, but it's only infallible because the Pope later on accepted it. But it was infallible before he accepted it. So I don't need the papacy. But going back to the initial point of this argument, what is the limit for you? And it's kind of getting late here, so I don't want to talk all night. But what is the limit for you that what's the limit to what's the point where you'll just say this is enough? Can a pope be like, for example, if you knew that a priest was a pedophile, would you take communion from him?
I've already answered this question.
No, you did. I never asked you this question. If you knew that a pope is molesting children, and you know for a fact that the church is covering up for him, and we have many examples of this, would you take communion from him?
No. This is in a previous
stream. Sorry, you're breaking up. Say that again. You broke up. Say that again.
I was talking about a previous stream.
I
said I was talking about a previous. Yeah, but like in the chat.
Okay.
But no. But what I'm saying is the breaking point, and I'll go after.
Okay, that's fine.
This, but I'm saying like the breaking point would be if a pope publicly taught heresy against the positive faith, everything, because that would contradict the papacy, which I don't believe can happen.
And when the Pope said that gay unions, civil unions, need protection, would you say that's heresy?
He said that in an interview.
So what? Would you say it's public? It's for the whole world to see. Would you say that that's a heresy?
Yes, that's.
So the Pope has taught heresy.
Heresy on his part.
All right.
Not via the magisterium, but yeah.
Oh, as long as it's not preached to the magisterium, it's a-okay. All right, man. It was nice talking to you. It was fun, and I'm gonna get to the music stuff. All right, man. Bye. I'll talk to you later, or whenever. See you later. Bye-bye. Oh, my God. Oh, Jesus. All right. God help us. Whatever. Pope can preach heresy in an interview for millions to see as long as it's not taught through the magisterium. That's okay. Only in religion can people accept such things.